Nathaniel Price is my name. Being 72 years old, I've discovered that the person who is the quietest in the room generally has all the cards. At a family supper last night, my only daughter Brenda shoved me down the stairs. "Get moving, Dad," she said, her voice full of anger. "Don't make me look bad in front of my real parents." She was talking about her in-laws. I slid down. I hit my head. Not one person came to aid me as I lay there bleeding on their lovely white carpet. I only made one phone call while they went back to their celebration. My daughter got 66 missed calls when she woke up this morning. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from before I tell you what happens next. If you've ever had to show someone who didn't believe in you who you really are, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. The dinner had been too much for me since I got there. I'm a simple guy. The tiny house that my late wife Anne-Marie and I bought 40 years ago is still mine. My garments are comfortable. I wore my nicest and only blazer and a clean pair of pants tonight. It wasn't enough. Brenda and her husband Chad live in a glass penthouse that doesn't feel like a home, it feels more like a high-end furnishing store. I bet the cold marble abstract art cost more than my automobile, and the windows looked out over the rest of the city. Other than the waiter they had hired for the night, I was the only black man in the room. The stress was instant. Beverly, Chad's mom, lifted up her wine glass, and the jewels on her hand sparkled in the light. "Nate," she murmured, her voice full of fake sympathy. Chad kept saying, "This is a $800 bottle of Cabernet. I hope you can understand. I'm not sure if you're used to this." I just nodded and gave her the kind, innocuous grin I had learned how to do. I thought I was used to it. Not really. The $900 bottle I drank last night was much smoother, but I simply smile. "Beverly, it's beautiful." "Thanks." My son-in-law Chad laughed. A quick bark. "Mom, be polite. It's easy to understand Dad Price. Nate, he likes simple things, right? You'd rather have a cool beer, wouldn't you?" I could see my kid was looking at me. Brenda, my only kid, was watching me with a frozen look and pleading eyes. "Please, Dad, just fit in. Just be quiet. Don't make this hard for me." She wanted so much to be one of them. She didn't remember who she was. She forgot about the brilliant, hilarious kid I raised in our small house, the one who used to say she detested snobs. Now she was married to one and was doing everything she could to become one. The simple comments kept coming. Richard, Chad's father, sent them. He was a man who carried his pride like a fancy outfit. His cologne was so powerful that it made my eyes water. He said, "So Nate," loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Chad says you used to be a mailman. Or was it a driver who brought it? Like that?" I said it in a low voice. "Logistics. What about logistics?" He laughed loudly as he cut into his filthy minion. "Okay. It must have been hard. That hefty lifting. I bet your retirement plan is doing great." He looked around the table and stopped for effect. "It's a good thing that Brenda and Chad are looking out for you now." He leaned over and patted my hand, which was a sign of absolute condescension. I kept quiet. I didn't tell him that I was the senior vice president of global logistics for one of the biggest shipping companies in the world. I didn't tell him I had retired, not because I was elderly, but because I was bored. I didn't inform him that my retirement savings were a $5 million investment portfolio. Run by a private company that Anne-Marie and I started years ago. A boglehead all the way through. Live simply and save a lot. I just nodded. "You are right, Richard. It's a good thing." Brenda, my daughter, let out that false chuckle again. The one that got on my nerves. "Dad, you're so funny." "Yes, we do a great job of taking care of my dad, don't we, honey?" She stared at Chad, hoping he would agree with her. Chad just muttered and stared at his phone. The rest of the meal was a show. A painful one. They chatted about their trip to Aspen that was coming up. Beverly made sure to emphasize, "The chalet is ski in, ski out, of course. I just can't stand having to walk to the lift." They also talked about the new Tesla Chad was test driving, and Richard whined about the taxes on his third holiday house. Every statement was a small, sharp scalpel that showed what they had and what they thought I didn't. I looked at my daughter. I saw her copy Beverly's hand movements in the mirror. I saw her swoon over Richard's monotonous stories about his golf club. I didn't know her. She was really lost. She had forgotten about Anne-Marie, my late wife, who raised her. Anne-Marie was very smart. She was a financial analyst who saw the world in numbers and patterns. She didn't like individuals like this. She would have seen through these arrogant, paper-thin idiots. And she would have been very sad to see what had happened to our daughter. The show was ended, finally. I was so tired. Not from the day, but from having to sit there, be little, and be the poor old mailman they needed me to be. I said, "Brenda," quietly, and pushed my chair back. It's getting late. I believe I'll go home. You could see how happy Brenda was. The weight was going away. She stood on her heels and clicked fiercely on the marble floor as she led me to the lobby. There was a silly internal staircase in the penthouse that went from the raised dining area to the front door in just 6 or 7 steps. The carpet was a thick, fluffy, ugly shade of white. "Hey, Dad," she said in a low hiss. "Why did you have to be so quiet? You made things awkward. Beverly was just trying to talk about the wine, and you just sat there. You made me look bad." I was at the top of the little stairway. I moved gently. My hip and an old injury from a college football game were hurting a little. I grabbed the shiny steel railing. "Brenda, I'm sorry you felt that way." I was just about to say anything when she cut me off. Her tolerance, which had been worn thin from a night of social climbing, snapped. "Can you just get it over with?" She growled, and her voice was harsh with a malice that stunned me. "You're usually so slow. You're making me feel bad. Do you not get it? I'm attempting to make a life for myself here. My in-laws are very significant to me. Don't make me look bad in front of my real parents. Her true mom and dad." The remarks hurt me more than the shove that came after. She shoved me firmly in the middle of my back. It wasn't a small push. It was a shove that was angry and forceful. I'm 72 years old. My equilibrium isn't as good as it used to be. I missed the rail when I reached for it. I completely missed the first step with my foot. I moved forward quickly. It wasn't a big fall like in a movie. It was an awkward, heavy fall that hurt. 6 steps felt like a big hole. My glasses flew off my face. I heard the horrible crack when they hit the marble floor below. At the bottom, my head hit the drywall. A loud, wet thud. Pain that was white hot burst behind my eyelids. I could taste copper in my mouth. I fell in a heap, my bad hip getting knotted up, and I screamed in protest. The world turned. I moaned and looked up. Brenda, Chad, Richard, and Beverly were all standing at the top of the stairs, their shadows cast by the bright light from the dining room. They were just observing me, gazing down on me like I was a piece of trash that had just dropped out of the trash can. Brenda stood there with her hands still raised and a look of sheer displeasure on her face. Nor fear, nor worry, just annoyance. Nobody moved. Nobody asked, "Dad, are you okay?" And nobody came to help me right away. Beverly, the mother-in-law, sighed in a very dramatic way. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she replied, her voice full of anger. "What a drama queen," Chad said with a low, disdainful laugh. "Okay," he said. "That's one way to leave. And Brenda, my daughter, my child." She only scowled at me. "Dad, look what you did," she murmured in a voice that was as icy as the marble floor. "You got blood on the carpet." Then they all turned at the same time. They went back into the living room. I could hear Beverly's chuckle echoing down the corridor. "Please, Brenda darling, get me another glass of that great wine." I was alone, lying in a broken heap at the bottom of their steps, bleeding and feeling ashamed. But after the shock wore off, something else came up. A frigid, clear, diamond-hard will. People assume I'm weak. They believe I'm poor. They don't think I'm anything. They just did the worst thing they could have done. I can see the next morning very clearly. My daughter Brenda was just waking up in her glass penthouse while I was lounging in a silk bathrobe in a suite at the Four Seasons, drinking the best Blue Mountain coffee money can buy. The sun was probably shining through and hitting the stain on the white carpet by the stairs. The mark I made. I know Chad, my son-in-law. He would have groaned when he woke up because his head hurt from all the $800 wine he had been drinking. He would have pushed Brenda. "I hope your old man had the decency to call a cab," he would have said. "I hate it when he acts like a drama queen just to get attention. He's fine." My daughter Brenda would have just nodded since she was too weary to protest. "I know, Chad. I'll deal with it later. He just doesn't get it." She would have walked barefoot over the chilly marble floor to the kitchen, which was a high-tech behemoth of stainless steel that always looked like no one had ever cooked in it. She would use her phone to call the high-end delivery service and get goods. I knew it was a weekly ritual. She never went to the grocery on her own. Why would she if someone else could do it for her? She would have put things in her virtual cart. $6 avocados from Peru, organic milk, that pricey sourdough bread from the bakery in the city, and maybe some champagne for mimosas. They needed to get over the stress of having her father bleed on their floor. She would have pushed checkout. And then the first rock fell into the avalanche. Payment not accepted. A flash of anger. She would have tried again. Payment not accepted. That's strange. She would yell out to Chad. "The grocery cart isn't working. Did you do something with it?" Chad, who was angry, would have thrown her his wallet from the bedroom. "Use mine." It's likely that the system is just having a problem. It's the morning of Sunday. She would grab his American Express card, which was gleaming platinum and the one he always showed off at restaurants by slapping it on the table. She would type in the numbers. Payment was not accepted. She would have been angry. She would attempt it again, but this time more slowly. Payment not accepted. Chad. Her voice would be a little higher and tighter now. Your doesn't work either. What is going on? He would have walked into the kitchen and taken the phone from her hand. You must have made a mistake when you typed it. Please give it to me. He would try to get into the app for his bank. The password is not valid. He would try again. The password is not correct. What the hell? He would mumble, asking for a new password. There would be no email. He would insist, with his voice getting louder, that it was a system error. It must be. But I realized it wasn't a system problem when I saw the sun rise over the park from my hotel room. It was a fix for the system. When the landline rang, the first true terror would have set in. That high-pitched, startling noise. Brenda would answer with anger. Hey there. A frigid voice from a professional on the other end. Ms. Price Thompson. This is the building management for the penthouse apartments. We're calling because your $8,000 automatic rent payment didn't go through. Brenda's blood would run cold. I know it did. What? That can't be done. She would have stuttered. The rent is always paid. It happens on its own. My hubby takes care of it. It's from his extra money account. The main signer has locked the account that it draws from, ma'am. We need the complete payment by 5 p.m. today, or we will start the legal process of evicting you. Have a great day. Click. She would have looked at Chad with wide eyes, terrified. Chad? What did he mean by frozen? What bonus account did you say was yours? Chad? I bet he was already sweating. His face, which is typically rosy and smug, would be pale. Yes, it is. I mean, it's not easy. It's a trust that two people share. It's just a bug. I'll get in touch with the bank. But before he could call, his phone would ring a different number. This is BMW Financial Services, Mr. Thompson. This morning, your payment for the 7 Series leasing was turned down. Next week, I'll pay it. Chad would snap and attempt to sound like he was in charge. Sir, I'm occupied. The voice on the other end would be just as frigid. You are already 60 days behind. Your deferment period is no longer valid. We will take back the car if we don't have payment by the end of the day. Hello. Click, Chad. Brenda would be yelling right now. 60 days late. You said you paid it. You said you got that big bonus. I did. I will, though. It's merely been put off. He would yell back, trying to come up with a falsehood, and then trip over his own lies. The symphony would start after that. Beep. A message for Brenda. American Express warning. The main account holder has put your extra card account ending in 005 on hold. Bleep. A text for Chad. Alert from American Express. The main account holder has frozen your extra card account that ends in 0006. Beep. A message to Brenda. Saks Fifth Avenue. Your account is frozen until you pay. Beep. A message to Chad. You can't use Apple Pay anymore. Main account holder. Chad would ultimately turn to Brenda. His mind was slow because it was finally putting things together. Brenda, those cards don't belong to you, do they? They belong to him. No, she would lie. It's an account for the whole family. Brenda. Chad would grasp her by the arm. That $8,000 rent wasn't my bonus, was it? It was him. Your dad was paying our rent. The other phone would ring before she could answer. The phone again. The one that was never used. Brenda would pick it up, shaking. Hi, Mrs. Thompson. Welcome to Crestview Academy. The $25,000 a semester private school for their 5-year-old son, Noah. We are phoning about a debt that is still due. We sent back the check you sent for tuition last week. Back? Brenda's voice would be quite quiet. Yes, ma'am. Account frozen with a stamp. We need you to keep Noah home tomorrow until the bill is paid. Click. That's when I know my daughter finally checked her phone. I really looked at it. She would have ignored the alerts from Saks, Visa, and the energy company. She would have seen the 66 calls from banks and creditors that she missed. And she would have seen that Dad had called her 20 times. She would have called my number, which I've had for 30 years. She would have heard the beeping and then the pre-recorded message. The number you called is no longer in service. I can see her expression, the perplexity, the anger, and the slow, icy understanding that something is wrong. She would have gone to her hubby. She would pronounce Chad with a shaky voice. He is not here. He isn't at the house. His phone isn't working. Oh my God, Chad. What did we do? Brenda's scream was very basic. It wasn't just being scared. It was the sound of a world falling apart. These are cards from Dad. She screamed and held her phone up like it was on fire. The school, the cars, and the rent. It's all him. It's all been him. Chad just glanced at her, his face showing that he didn't believe her. The cards he had. He said it again, but this time his voice was dangerously low. Your dad's cards. You said he worked as a mailman. You said he was out of money. I believed he was. Brenda was crying and swiping at her phone screen like crazy, her knuckles white. That little house is where he lives. He wears clothing that are old. He said he worked in logistics. What about logistics? Chad mumbled the phrase, which tasted like ash in his tongue. He finally got it. He didn't merely marry into a humble household. He had been tricked. No, they had been tricked. Brenda noticed it then. The notification center on her phone. There was a lot of red. 66 calls that were missed. 66. She browsed through them, her hands shaking a lot. Bank of America, Chase, American Express, the Crestview Academy, BMW Financial, the Penthouse Residences, Saks, Neiman Marcus, and 20 missed calls from one person, Dad. Oh my God, she whispered. Dad's calls weren't only to check in. They were the alerts for fraud that were sent out automatically. He was the bank. He was the whole thing. Give him a call. Chad yelled and grabbed her by the shoulders. Right immediately, call him. Let him know it was a mistake. Tell him we're sorry. Say anything to him. Brenda pressed the touch with shaking fingertips. Dad. She held the phone up to her ear. She held her breath. It didn't even make a sound. A frigid artificial voice spoke right away. We're sorry. The number you called is no longer in service. Click. She looked at the phone. Not connected? She said softly. No. He wouldn't do it. He can't. She quickly phoned another number. The phone line. The one in the small, dirty house she hadn't been to in over a year. The number she had known by heart since she was a child. She paid attention. One ring. A sound that was empty and hollow echoed through a house where no one was home. 2 rings. 3. 4. It kept ringing and ringing. A sarcastic sound that was alone till the voicemail picked up. A voice from the past. My voice is happy. Easy. Hello, Nate here. Sorry I didn't get to see you. Leave a message after the beep. Beep. Brenda let go of the phone. It fell and made a noise on the marble floor. She turned to Chad, her face absolutely white. All of her wrath was gone, and in its stead was a deep, profound fear. She muttered, Chad. He's not at the house. He's gone. I wasn't at a hospital. Hospitals are for people who have been hurt, and I was done being one of them. I was in the Four Seasons presidential suite. The room was 3 times the size of my daughter's whole apartment and was adorned with deep woods and quiet, expensive materials. The city lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows turned into a river of diamonds. I was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, not the chilly plastic of an emergency department. A glass of dark amber liquid. There was a 25-year-old single malt sitting on the wood desk next to me. The only sound in the big room was the faint, steady snip-snip of medical scissors. Drive, Samuels, who has been my doctor for more than 20 years, was putting the last stitch in my forehead. His touch was professional, discreet, and very steady. Just a clean cut, Nate, he said in a hushed voice. You were lucky. If you had been a few inches lower, we would be talking about a bad concussion or a broken orbital. He put on a thin, clean bandage. I nodded slowly, and the movement was tight. Oh, I knew I was lucky. I was lucky my daughter had pushed me. I was lucky her in-laws had laughed. I was lucky they had all shown me in the clearest possible terms exactly who they were. The bleeding had stopped, but something else had just begun. Sitting across from me in an identical leather chair was the woman who held all the keys to the kingdom, Anita Jackson. She wasn't just my estate planner, she was my fortress. She was the executive of my late wife and Aries will. And for 30 years, she had been my most trusted friend and advisor. While Dr. Samuels looked concerned, Anita looked calm. Not just calm, she looked focused. She was a sharp, brilliant woman, wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than my daughter's sofa. Her files were arranged perfectly on the desk between us. She was the human equivalent of a finely tuned engine, and I knew right now she was running at full power. I remembered the call I'd made at 2 a.m. after they had left me, after they had walked past my bleeding body to have another glass of wine. I had laid there on that plush white carpet for 10 minutes, just listening to their laughter, listening to Beverly's shrill voice complaining about the stock market. Then I pulled myself up. My hip itched, my head throbbed, but my mind was a block of ice. I didn't go out the front door. I took the service elevator down to the loading dock. I sat on a concrete step in the cold night air, the blood drying on my cheek, and I made one call, not to 911, not to the police. I called her. My voice hadn't even been shaking. It was flat, empty. "Anita," I said. "It's time." A pause on the other end. No questions. "No, Nate, are you okay?" Just the 4 words I needed to hear. "Consider it done, Nate." After that, I called Dr. Samuels. "I've had an accident. Meet me at the suite." Then I called my private security who picked me up from that loading dock in a black town car, unseen, unheard. I am not a poor man. I am just a man who has played poor for a very, very long time. Dr. Samuels finished packing his black leather bag. "You'll need to rest, Nate. No sudden movements, and I'd recommend avoiding stairs." He allowed himself a small dry smile. I thanked him. He nodded to Anita, a gesture of deep respect, and let himself out. The heavy suite door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing us inside. Now we were alone. Anita hadn't moved. She waited until the door was shut, then slid a single thin file across the polished desk. "I did as you instructed, Nate," she said. Her voice was smooth, precise protocol. "Anne-Marie was activated at 2:03 a.m. this morning." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. I already knew, of course. Anne-Marie and I had designed the protocol ourselves, but I wanted to hear it. I needed to hear the sound of the gates closing. Anita tapped the file. "It means," she said, "that every supplementary credit card issued from your primary accounts, specifically the 2 held by Brenda Price Thompson and the 3 held by Chad Thompson, are, as of this moment, just pieces of plastic." She paused. "It means the $8,000 automated monthly rent subsidy for the penthouse residents has been terminated effective immediately." I stared at the untouched glass of scotch. "It means," she continued, "the lease guarantee you co-signed for that BMW 7 Series has been legally revoked, citing 60 days of non-payment by them, which, as you know, you had previously been covering without their knowledge. It means the tuition payment for Crestview Academy, which was scheduled to post tomorrow morning, has been cancelled. The account it draws from is frozen." She leaned forward slightly. "And finally, it means that every single financial safety net you have spent the last 2 years weaving to protect your daughter has just been removed. As of this moment, Nate, they are entirely, completely on their own." I closed my eyes. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound cold, hollowing sense of quiet. The quiet of a battlefield right after the first cannon shot has been fired. "Protocol Anne-Marie," I whispered. My late wife. My brilliant Anne-Marie. She had known even from the grave, she had seen this day coming. She had left me the tools not for revenge, for correction. I opened my eyes and finally picked up the glass. "Good," I said, the liquid burning a welcome trail down my throat. "That's a start." I picked up the glass of scotch, the ice clinking softly, but I didn't drink. I just stared at the golden liquid. "She pushed me, Anita." I said it quietly. The words hung in the air of that vast silent suite. Anita's face, usually so composed, tightened for just a fraction of a second. That was all the emotion she allowed herself. "Pushed you down the stairs at their home because I was moving too slowly." I took a breath. The words tasted like bile. And then she screamed at me. Said I was embarrassing her in front of her real parents. I let that sink in. Her real parents, I repeated the absurdity of it, bitter on my tongue. The ones who spent the entire dinner reminding me I was a poor retired mailman. The ones who looked at me like I was something they'd stepped in. I finally took a sip. The burn was good. It grounded me. "She has no idea what she's done, Nate," Anita said, her voice soft, but laced with steel. "Oh, she has no idea about any of it," I replied. I finally looked up from the glass and met her eyes. "Anita, I've been a fool for 2 years. 2 solid years, I've been funding that entire fantasy life of hers. I paid the $8,000 a month for that glass box they call a penthouse. I paid the lease on that ridiculous BMW Chad drives. I paid the $25,000 tuition for my grandson's preschool, the one they brag about. I set the glass down. I paid for the clothes on their backs, the groceries they order, the trips they take." I leaned forward, the anger not hot, but cold and heavy. "And $192,000, Anita, that's what I've given them in 24 months. $192,000. And the worst part," I said, "the part that keeps me awake at night, is that they didn't even know it was me. They thought it was him. They thought," I said with a bitter laugh, "that Chad was some kind of financial genius. He told Brenda it was all from his executive bonus account. His bonus. He told her he was a rising star at his firm. Anita was quiet for a long moment. She slid another thicker file across the desk. Nate, she said gently, we need to talk about that bonus account. You need to know what you've really been funding. I frowned. What do you mean? I ran the full background check you authorized last month. She said the just-in-case protocol. Chad Thompson doesn't have a bonus account, Nate. He doesn't even have a job. I felt my stomach clench. What? Chad was fired from his financial firm 2 years ago. The exact same month your assistance began. Fired? I said, my mind racing. Why, a layoff? Anita shook her head. Her eyes were full of pity, but her voice was clinical. No, he was fired for cause. He was caught embezzling Nate. $400,000 from a client's trust fund. He was a gambler. He'd lost it all. My God, I leaned back in the chair. The room felt like it was tilting. The firm didn't press charges, Anita continued. Because it would have been a public scandal. They hushed it up, they made him sign a non-disclosure agreement and forced him into restitution. But the district attorney's office has been quietly building a criminal case against him ever since. He isn't just a failure, Nate. He's a felon in waiting. I was speechless. The man my daughter married, the man living off my money, a common thief. So the $8,000 a month, I whispered, it wasn't just for rent. It was for hush money. It was for everything, Anita said. He was and is completely desperate. He has no income, no prospects. You weren't just funding their lifestyle, Nate. You were funding his silence. I stood up. I walked to the window. The city lights seemed to mock me. And his parents, Richard and Beverly, the ones with the $800 wine and the ski chalets. They know, Anita said. They know exactly who their son is. She opened the final file. I ran their financials, too, she said. The Thompsons are a house of cards. Richard's investments were all bad bets. They're leveraged to the hilt. They're facing half a dozen lawsuits from creditors. They are, to put it plainly, completely, and utterly bankrupt. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The dinner, the snobbery, the insults. It was all a performance. They weren't just being arrogant. I realized they were terrified. They were, Anita confirmed. They saw Brenda as their lifeline. Or more accurately, they saw you. They thought their son had married into quiet old money. They were pressuring Chad to get more from you to get you to sell your house to sign over your assets. I turned back from the window. The blood on my forehead had dried. The pain in my hip was a dull throb. But it was nothing compared to this. So I said, the final horrible truth settling over me. That push last night. That wasn't just my daughter being an impatient, spoiled brat. Anita Jackson looked me straight in the eye. No, Nate, she said, her voice filled with a terrible cold certainty. They weren't just trying to get you out of the way for the night. They were trying to get you out of the way for good. I stood at that window for a long time. The lights of the city got blurry. I thought about Aneri. I remembered how hilarious and bright Brenda used to be as a little girl. The one who would come to me with a scraped knee and trust me to treat it. Where did she go? When did she learn to be able to stand and watch her father bleed? When did she start making plans for him to fall? The melancholy seemed like a heavy weight that made it hard to breathe. But the ice was expanding underneath it. The man they assumed I was, the humble mailman, could have gotten hurt. He could have been puzzled. But the man in this suite, the one who had built an empire in secret, was not bewildered. He was fighting. I looked back at Anita. I still had the scotch in my palm, and it was still there. Anita, I've been too kind. Even though my voice was soft, the tone made her look up. I told her that all this time I had been keeping her safe from him, his parents, and her own bad choices. I thought I was acting like a dad. I put the glass on the table. I was only helping. I was their safety net, and they just cut it. I stared her in the eye. We're not simply freezing the accounts, we're also collecting. Anita Jackson smiled for the first time that night. The smile wasn't warm. The smile on the surgeon's face said they were ready to go ahead with the surgery. She said, I was hoping you'd say that, Nate. She opened her briefcase and took out another file that was considerably thinner. She added that these are the digital promissory notes that Brenda and Chad signed every time they agreed to receive an executive bonus transfer. My eyebrows went up. You made them sign promissory notes. Anita responded, of course, as if it were clear. It was extremely evident what Anne-Marie's protocol was. Don't give a gift that looks like money. Always give it as a loan. Nate, they never read the fine print. They just clicked accept to obtain the cash. She tapped the file. These are set in stone. $192,000 plus interest is required right away when asked for. And at 3:05 a.m. this morning, I made a formal request. The room was filled with a strange type of silence. This was it. What to do next? Anita stated they will be served by morning. But Nate, you know what this means. When they get that notice and know they owe you a lot of money, they won't just call. They will come for you. I told them they would go to the house. Yes, she said. They'll come to your house in the old neighborhood to try to scare you and make the poor old mailman back down. I shook my head. I strolled over to the tiny bar and got myself a glass of water. My hand was totally still. I told them to go to the house, but they wouldn't find me. I took a long, slow drink. I told him that house was just bait. Anita smiled again. Let them search for a ghost. Brenda and Chad rushed out of the yellow cab, which was shaking as it waited expectantly at the curb. The ride in the cab was humiliating. Chad, who was driving a 7 Series BMW only yesterday, had to argue with the driver and promise to pay him in cash once everything was settled. They stood on the broken sidewalk in front of my own house, the one where Brenda grew up. The one she hadn't taken Chad to in almost 5 years. It was a little, inexpensive, clean 2-bedroom house with a porch swing that I used every night. After the glass penthouse, it must have looked like a hut to them. But I knew something they didn't. This shanty was on 2 lots in a neighborhood that was quickly becoming more upscale. The land alone was worth more than the apartment they lived in. That's it. Chad spat, disgusted by the chipping paint on the porch railing. This is where he stays. I told you, Chad, he's not that smart. Brenda's voice was panicky. She went up the path and started banging on the door. Father. Dad, let me in. It's me. We need to talk to you, Brenda. The only thing she could hear was the sound of her own fist hitting the hard wood. He isn't here. Chad snarled and tried the doorknob. It was locked. He stepped over to a window and put his palms on the glass, looking into the dark living room. There's nothing in it. There is no one here. He is gone. He can't be gone. Brenda's voice was getting higher, and she was starting to panic. Where would he go? He can't go somewhere else. Dad. She shook the doorknob, making a sound that was both urgent and ineffectual. Chad took a step back, his mind racing. The old man is having fun. He's hiding. He thinks he's smart. He peered at the locked door and then at his shoulder, as if he were figuring up how much it would cost to break it down. Searching for Mr. Price. The voice was deep, slow, and peaceful. They both turned around. My neighbor, Marcus Henderson, was standing on the sidewalk. Henderson and I were in the same unit a long time ago. He was a strong man with eyes that had seen everything and spoke very little. To put it simply, he was the last person on earth you wanted to cross. He was my oldest friend. He was wearing plain work overalls and holding a wrench like he had just fixed a pipe. Who are you? Chad snapped right away, showing his attitude. Henderson didn't pay any attention to him. He couldn't take his eyes off my daughter. Brenda, he murmured, his voice steady. It's been a while. You don't see your dad very often anymore. Brenda felt a mix of shame and frustration. Mr. Henderson? Yes, hi. Have you seen my dad? It's an emergency. We really need to talk to him. Henderson said the word emergency again, not as a question but as a declaration. He slowly cleaned his hands on a cloth, never taking his eyes off her face. He knew you would be there. Brenda responded, he did, with a hint of optimism in her voice. Is he here? Is he in there? No, Henderson responded simply. He's not here. He left last night. It seemed like he was in a hurry. He had a bad wound on his head. He watched Brenda jump. He was aware. He knew, of course. I called him shortly after I called Anita. But Henderson kept reaching inside the pocket of his overalls. He told me to give this to you. You said you'd come by. He held out a plain white envelope. My crisp, precise handwriting wrote simply one word on the front. Brenda. Chad rushed for it, but Henderson shifted his hand just out of reach, still looking at my daughter. He gave it to her and only her. Brenda's hand shook as she reached for the envelope. It felt like it was thin. Not thick enough to hold money and not heavy enough to constitute a set of keys. She looked at Henderson and then at the envelope. She muttered, "What is this?" He didn't say, Henderson said. He just said it was the first invoice. He turned around and went slowly back to his own house, leaving them standing on the pavement with the cab driver honking angrily behind them. Brenda's hands were shaking. The cab driver yelled at them to pay the fare, but Chad merely waved him off. And the driver, who saw Chad's face, made the smart choice to wait. The envelope was thin. Not thick enough. Brenda ripped it open. A desperate ripping noise on the peaceful street. She was asking God for money, a check, or a key to a safe deposit box. Anything. A solitary piece of folded paper dropped to the ground, which was dusty. She grabbed it. What is it? Chad yelled, grasping her arm. Is it cash? Brenda's eyes whispered no as she looked over the page. It's a bill. A bill? Chad tore the paper out of her hands. What the hell is he paying bills for now? He looked at the paper. He read out loud, Reliable Roofing Solutions. Done with the job. The total is $15,000. He turned the paper over. There was a big red rubber stamp at the bottom of the page. Paid in full. Brenda just looked. She said, 15,000. The number didn't make sense. 15,000? How did he get that? He gets a set amount of money each month. He gets by on his previous pension. He used to work as a mailman. The picture of her father that she had carefully built up in her mind and used as an excuse was falling apart. He constantly said he didn't have any money saved up. He told me he gave me everything he had. He was lying. Chad didn't hear. He wasn't looking at the bill anymore. He was staring at the home. He was staring at the broken paint, the yard that had grown too big, and the spanking new, pricey architectural shingles on the roof. Who cares? Chad's voice was a low, excited growl. Why does it matter where he received the money for the roof? Can't you see what this means? Brenda cried because it meant he lied to her. Chad said, it means he has money. And grabbed her face. It meant he had cash. And where do you believe the rest of it is? It's inside this. He hit the side of the house. He was peering past the little house. He was staring at the hip coffee shop 3 streets away. He was watching the new condos go up on the street next to his. This area was going crazy. That stupid old man. Chad laughed a real, honest laugh of discovery. He was sitting on a lot of gold. Brenda, this country. This lot could be worth $1 million or $2 million. He didn't think twice. He took out his phone and moved his hands fast. Brenda replied, what are you doing? She was still shocked by the bill. I'm calling Stephen, my realtor. He tried to sell us the Hampton house. He knows this area. He put the phone to his ear and tapped his foot on the walkway in a hurry. Hey, it's Stephen Chad Thompson. I've got a great piece of land for you in the old district. My father-in-law's house. He's not in the image anymore. We need to sell quickly for cash. How fast can you look at the title and put it up for sale? He walked back and forth on the pavement like a predator that had just located a new scent. Whatever you have to do, I don't care. Get it moving. I need an offer by tonight. Yes, tonight. He hung up with a big, unpleasant smile on his face. He looked at Brenda, who was still clutching the bill that couldn't be paid. He said, you see, and grabbed her. It's all good. That old man just gave us a lot of money. Chad was so excited that he was almost vibrating. He had figured it out. He was really smart. He had turned this calamity into a win. He even told the cab driver with a grin, wait right here. I'll give you a big tip when the wire transfer goes through. He and Brenda sat on the porch steps, the peeling paint scratching her legs, but she didn't mind. $1 million. The phone rang. The real estate agent was on the phone. Chad answered it and put it on speaker so Brenda could hear the good news. That was quick, Stephen. Did you get it on the list? What is the first bid? There was a pause on the other end, a strange, clinical silence. Mr. Thompson. Steve. The voice of the realtor sounded very different. Nor smooth, nor pushy. He sounded scared. Mr. Thompson, I can't put this property on the list. Chad's smile stopped. What? What do you mean you can't? It's a home. Just get rid of it. No, sir. Stephen said, you don't get it. You asked me to do the title search, and I did it. This piece of land. Nathaniel Price does not own it. Brenda's head snapped up. What? That's not possible, Chad yelled into the phone. For 40 years, he's resided here. Who else could own it? Sir, I'm only telling you what the county records state. The title for this property, and in fact, the whole parcel of land was transferred 10 years ago. It's held by a private trust. Chad responded, a trust? And the word sounded strange to him. What trust? Who controls it? Let me read this. It's called the Anne-Marie Price Trust. Brenda felt the air leave her lungs. It was as if someone had shoved her hard in the chest. Anne-Marie, she mumbled the word, feeling weird on her tongue. My mother, but she's dead. She died 10 years ago. I know, ma'am, the realtor said, his voice full of apology now. But the trust is active. And the trustee? Well, the trustee is not Mr. Price. I'm sorry I can't help you. This house is locked up tighter than Fort Knox. The call ended. Chad slowly lowered the phone. The smug, triumphant look was gone. He looked terrified. Brenda just sat there on the broken steps of the house she grew up in. "Mom," she said to the empty air. "A trust." "What trust?" I sat in that suite for a long time, just staring at the city. The sun was high now. A beautiful, clear morning. The kind of morning that makes you feel alive. Unless you were my daughter. I thought about Brenda sitting in that dark, cold penthouse. I thought about the panic, the fear, the confusion. It was a cruel thing to do to your only child. But then I thought about the sound of my head hitting the drywall. I thought about the sound of their laughter as they walked away. And I knew I wasn't being cruel. I was being just. "They'll be desperate," I said to Anita. She was standing by the window looking down at the street. "They're already past desperate, Nate. They're cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous." She turned to face me. The pity was gone from her eyes, replaced by that sharp analytical focus I had relied on for 30 years. "When you called me from the loading dock last night," she said, "you were in shock, but you were also clear. You said, 'Find out why.' I thought I knew why." I said, my voice was rough. "Chad's a failed gambler. His parents are broke. They're leeches, parasites. They wanted my money. It's worse than that, Nate." She walked back to the desk and opened a new file. A file I hadn't seen before. It was bound in black leather. I put my best private investigator on them immediately. The just-in-case protocol Inari insisted we create. My late wife, always 3 steps ahead. The investigator has been tailing Richard and Beverly Thompson since 4 a.m. this morning. After they left your old house, after they discovered the trust, they drove straight to a diner in Queens to meet Chad. They're panicking. I said it wasn't a question. They're planning. Anita corrected me. "Nate, they are not just bankrupt. They are desperate. And desperate people don't just back down, they double down." She slid a small digital audio recorder across the polished surface of the desk. It looked heavy, dangerous. My investigator put a bug in their car before they even got to the diner. He recorded their entire conversation. I looked at the small black device. I didn't want to hear it, but I knew I had to. Anita pressed the play button. The speakers hissed. I heard the faint sound of clattering plates. A waitress asking for a coffee order. And then I heard Richard Thompson's voice. That booming, arrogant voice I'd heard last night, but the arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a low, desperate, rat-like hiss. "The house is a bust." Richard's voice crackled. "The old man locked it all up. The trust. That damn smart-mouthed wife of his locked it all up from the grave." Then Beverly, her voice wasn't smooth and cultured now. It was shrill, panicked. "So, what do we do? Richard, Chad, what do we do? We're ruined. That loan shark is going to break your father's legs. He's going to find me. Then my son-in-law. Chad. Shut up, both of you." He growled. "Let me think." There was a long, terrible silence on the recording. Just the sound of a spoon stirring coffee scraping the side of the cup again and again. "He cut us off," Chad said finally. "The rent, the cards, the car. He's trying to ruin us. He's trying to ruin Brenda." Then Richard's voice colder this time. "He's not trying, son. He did. Unless." "Unless what?" Chad snapped. "Unless," Richard said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Brenda isn't just his daughter. Unless she becomes his sole heir." My hands gripped the arms of the leather chair. My knuckles went white. I knew before he even said it what was coming next. Beverly's voice was a gasp. "What are you saying, Richard?" "He's in a hotel. He's hidden. We don't even know where he is. He's an old man." Richard's voice was suddenly full of energy. 72. He had a fall last night. He hit his head. Old men are fragile, Beverly. They get confused. They have accidents all the time. I could hear Chad breathing on the recording. A slow, heavy sound. "An accident," Chad repeated. "A simple slip and fall." Richard said, his voice quickening, the plan forming on a wet sidewalk. "Maybe down a flight of stairs at that fancy hotel. A tragic accident. He hits his head again, this time harder." "Oh my God," Beverly whispered. "Don't oh my God, me Beverly," Richard snapped. "It's him or us. If he dies, Brenda gets everything. The trust, the house, those hidden accounts. And if she gets everything, we get everything. We are saved. Chad is saved." Then Chad spoke. His voice was the one that broke me. It was calm. It was logical. "He has a life insurance policy," Chad said. "I saw it when I helped him with his simple finances 6 months ago. $1 million. Brenda is the only beneficiary. $1 million. I didn't have $1 million life insurance policy. I had a small $50,000 policy just for burial expenses. Where did he owe? Oh, no. Anita, I whispered, my voice interrupting the recording. Check my policies, my life insurance now. Anita was already typing on her laptop. Her face, which had been stoned, went pale. Nate, she said, her voice shaking for the first time. 6 months ago, a new $1 million term life policy was taken out in your name. Brenda is the recipient. The premium came from a different account. She said, Chad forged your digital signature to give it the go-ahead. They weren't only going to kill me. For months, they had been getting ready. I took a peek at the recorder. I told them to play the remainder. Anita pushed the button. Richard's voice was full of victory. It's just right. The old man doesn't understand. He's been walking about. He's not stable. He falls down. He passes away. Brenda is heartbroken. We, her loving and supportive family, are there for her. We help her deal with her unexpected new inheritance. Chad answered, we just have to find him. Richard said we would. We finish what Brenda started when we do. Anita hit stop. It was completely quiet in that suite. It was the quiet of a grave. They're not just leeches, I said. The words tasted like gravel in my mouth. They're killers. They are, Anita said. And Nate, now that you've cut off their money, you've taken away their last reason to be patient. You are no longer their piggy bank, she said, looking me straight in the eye. You are just the problem. I could feel the blood leaving my face, and it wasn't because of the air conditioning in the suite. That tape, Richard's voice, finish what Brenda started. The voice of Beverly. A terrible accident. The voice of Chad. $1 million. I looked down at the little dark gash on my hand that I suffered when my spectacles broke on the marble. I told Anita that push. I spoke in a hoarse whisper. Last night. That wasn't simply being impatient. She wasn't simply being a brat. I finally got it. Wasn't it a test? They were trying to see how weak I was. To test whether I would break. Anita didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her eyes were full of a profound, tired melancholy that spoke it all. She had known. She had known because Aneri had told her. Anne-Marie, my late wife, was more than just my partner for 45 years. She was the sharpest lady I ever met. She wasn't just a stay-at-home mom. She was a clever, sharp, and uncompromising financial analyst. She could spot the falsehood in a quarterly report in less than 30 seconds. And she could read people much faster. She loved our daughter very much. She loved Brenda so much that it worried me at times. But she never stopped seeing her. She saw what was wrong with her. The one I had always tried to cover up and mend. Nate, she has a good heart. Marie used to tell me this a long time ago, before she got sick. We would sit on the porch of our small house and watch Brenda get ready for a date. She has a good heart, but her back is weak. She will always be drawn to the most shiny thing in the room. She needs approval more than she needs to breathe. One day, a man will come along and promise her the world. She will let him burn hours down simply to experience the warmth. I believed she was being negative. I thought she was being too tough on her. I was mistaken. When Brenda presented us to Chad, I saw a salesman with a phony smile, a rented watch, and too much fragrance. Marie noticed a parasite. Nate, he's a leech. She told me that night after they left. He doesn't care about her. He's taking advantage of her. He can smell how weak she is. He can smell how stable we are. At that point, she was already sick. The cancer spread quickly, but her intellect was clear. She wasn't only getting ready to die in the last several weeks. She was getting me ready. She was getting ready for this day. She spotted him. I whispered, and my voice was husky. She saw this a decade ago. She knew this day would happen. She saw more than that. Nate, Anita remarked in a low voice, full of respect. She made plans for it. The Anne-Marie Price Trust is the fortress she constructed. It was the last great thing she did. She grabbed all of her money, including her inheritance from her parents, her own investment portfolio, and her retirement savings. She even put our little house in it. She poured everything into a trust that couldn't be broken. She put it away. I was in charge of the trust. The modest retired mailman was in charge of the gate. Brenda and Chad thought my small house was the only thing I owned. They thought my only source of money was my pension. They didn't know that house was only a piece of paper, one line in a $5 million portfolio. A portfolio that should have belonged to Brenda. But I remembered the will I had written and how my fingers shook the day after her funeral. The chapter about death. Anita said the will was a work of art when she pulled it out of the scary black binder. She had a copy of it all. Anne-Marie was a smart woman, but she wasn't very forgiving. She was fair. She told Brenda that she could only inherit if she met two requirements. I remembered them like they were written on my brain. Anita read Clause 4, Section B, even though she didn't have to. If Brenda Price Thompson, the beneficiary, legally marries someone whom the trustee, Nathaniel Price, does not approve of in writing, citing clear evidence of financial or moral instability, she will be promptly and forever disinherited. I usually said to myself that I never utilized it. I couldn't. How could you do that to your own child? How can you tell her that the man she loves is a liar when you know he is? I looked at Anita and felt the same shame in my chest. I thought I could handle it. I assumed that if I just supported them by paying their rent and vehicle payments and taking away the burden of money, Chad would get better and Brenda would be happy. I kept wishing Aneri was incorrect. Anita whispered softly, "You were being a father. You were trying to fix something she had already fixed." I told them I was a fool. And I was weak. I should have utilized the clause. Anita turned the page and remarked, "It doesn't matter, Nate. Because Marie was powerful and you were weak. She gave you 2 keys to lock the door with. You didn't use the first one. She hit the paper. So, she gave you a second." I shut my eyes. I knew what was going to happen. The clause I never thought anyone would talk about again. Section C of Clause 4. Anita's voice was chilly and distinct, breaking the silence in the suite. She read, "Brenda will be disinherited, which is also known as the Judas Clause. If she, quote, engages in any action, financial or physical, that brings intentional malicious harm, disrepute, or physical danger to the family legacy or to the person of the trustee." The words hung in the air. Hurtful behavior on purpose. The trustee's life is under jeopardy. She shoved me down the steps. I said it quietly. "She shoved you down the steps." Anita said, her voice was flat. Her in-laws and spouse planned my death as she stood by and listened. She stood there and listened. All that greed, all that planning, and all that plotting to acquire an inheritance. I stared at Anita, and my head was throbbing. Oh my God, does she know she doesn't know? Anita stated they are battling, plotting, and maybe even trying to kill you for an inheritance that she previously lost. She legally and permanently disinherited herself the second she touched you last night. It's over. I couldn't say anything. The awful irony of it all. So, I said, attempting to catch up with my thoughts. Who gets it if Brenda isn't there? Who gets everything? Anita's question now lingered in the air, heavy and certain. So, Nate, if Brenda is formally and permanently cut off from her inheritance, who gets everything? Who is the beneficiary in case of death? A smile came to my lips. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was chilly. The man had just watched a 45-year chess game come to a close, and his smile showed it. Aneri smiled. I said that Anne-Marie was very careful. My voice was low. She always tied up all the loose ends. Nate, never leave a fortune to just one person. Always have a backup. Always reward character, not just blood, she used to say. I stared behind Anita at the wall. But I was seeing a recollection. Last year, I remember Brenda preparing her huge, over-the-top wedding. The one I paid for, even if she assumed Chad did. I remembered her going over the list of guests. With a red pen, she crossed out names with sharp lines. She had inquired, "Who's this?" With a disgusted look on her face. "Yes, Kesha Price." "Oh, Dad, no, we are not inviting her." "Kesha," I inquired, astonished. "That's your cousin. That's my sister's girl." "I don't care," Brenda said angrily. She's poor. She's a 3rd-grade teacher in the Bronx. What is she going to wear rags? What are we going to talk to her about? She'll make Chad's parents uncomfortable. She'll make me uncomfortable. She is not coming." I remembered the finality in her voice, the absolute casual cruelty of it. I turned my gaze back to Anita. "The contingent beneficiary," I said, savoring every word, "is Kesha Price, my sister's daughter." I let the name settle in the room. "Brenda's poor cousin," I said. "The one she refused to invite to her wedding. The one she called rags behind her back. The one who has spent the last 10 years teaching in an inner-city school, working 2 extra jobs just to pay off her student loans, never asking anyone for a dime." Anita's professional mask slipped, her eyes widened, and then a slow, admiring smile spread across her face. "Anne-Marie," she whispered. "That magnificent, brilliant woman." "Yes," I said. "Anne-Marie always loved Kesha. She said Kesha had a spine of steel. She said Kesha was the one who had her blood in her, not Brenda." I stood up and walked back to the window. The trap was set. The bait was in the water and the players were all moving exactly as Anne-Marie had predicted. Brenda and Chad are out there right now trying to sell a house that doesn't belong to them. I said. Richard and Beverly are in a diner plotting to murder a man who is already 2 steps ahead of them. They are all fighting over an inheritance. I whispered that my daughter just handed over with her own 2 hands to the one person on earth she despises most. I was in my suite. They were in hell, a hell of their own making. A $300 a week motel room off the interstate with thin walls and the smell of stale cigarettes and mildew. When the bank sealed that penthouse, they didn't just lose their home. They lost their identity. I know exactly how that scene played out. My daughter Brenda would have been sitting on the edge of a stained mattress, her expensive clothes piled in a heap on the dirty floor. She would be crying the ugly, snot-nosed crying of a child who has finally been told no. And Chad, her husband. He would be pacing back and forth in the 3 feet of space between the bed and the humming empty mini fridge. A caged, worthless animal. You did this. I can hear his voice. A venomous, desperate whisper. Your father, you're crazy, vindictive, lying old man. He cut us off. He ruined us. And Brenda. My daughter would have screamed back, her voice raw. Me? You did this. You were the one who got fired. You were the one who lied to me for 2 years. You told me you were a genius, Chad. You told me you were making millions. We were going to be rich. He would have yelled. That house was ours. That inheritance was yours. You just had to handle him. One little push down the stairs and you couldn't even do that right. I didn't know he was made of glass, she'd sob. How was I supposed to know the thin walls would have done nothing to muffle their fight? But the real pressure wasn't just inside that room. It was coming through the phone. I know Chad's phone rang. I know. He looked at the caller ID. Richard, his father, he would have tried to compose himself to put on his voice of fake authority. Dad, he'd say, listen, there's just been a small complication. The old man, he's playing some kind of game. He's locked up the assets. I knew Richard Thompson. He was not an understanding man. He was a man drowning, and he was perfectly willing to pull his own son under with him. I can hear Richard's voice not booming with arrogance now, but thin and ready with pure terror screaming through that cheap speaker. Games. That loan shark, the one you got us involved with, just called me. He gives me 48 hours, Chad. 48 hours before he sends his men to collect. And he doesn't want money, son. He wants kneecaps. Dad, I just need time, Chad would plead. You fix this, Richard would be roaring. You get that old man's money or so. Please help me. God, I'll tell those men where to locate you. Instead, I am not going down for you, you useless coward. The line would go dead. Click. Chad would be shaking. He would look at Brenda, his eyes wide. This was no longer about a penthouse. This was no longer about pride. This was about survival. And then, as if on cue, Brenda's phone would ring. Beverly, her mother-in-law. Brenda would answer, her voice trembling. Beverly, please. It's just a misunderstanding. My dad is just confused. I can fix this. But Beverly, the woman who last night pretended to be a queen, would show her true colors. Fix this. You useless common girl. You had one job. You were supposed to secure this family. You married a fraud, and now you have failed us. If my husband goes down for this, you are coming down with us. Do you hear me, Brenda? You are nothing. Click. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence in that cheap motel room. Just the rumble of a truck passing on the highway outside. They had nothing. No money, no home, no cars, no allies. And they had just been threatened directly by the very people they had tried so desperately to impress. This was the bottom. This was the moment of absolute despair. The moment I had been waiting for. They sat there for a long time. I know they did. The reality of their situation was a physical weight crushing the air from their lungs. They were out of options. And that is when I sent them the hook. Brenda's phone, which she had thrown onto the dirty bedspread, lit up. A single quiet beep. She would have ignored it. It was just another creditor. Another payment failed alert. But then it lit up again. An email notification. She would have picked it up. Her eyes dull. The subject line was simple. Transaction receipt. She opened it. It was not a warning. It was not a bill. It was a receipt. A digital receipt in bright, cheerful colors. Thank you for your purchase. $5,000. The Emporium Gift Shop. The Four Seasons Hotel. Brenda would have stared at it. $5,000. Her voice would be a whisper. Chad would snatch the phone from her hand. He would read the message. His eyes dead in panic seconds before would suddenly light up with a new terrible energy. He's there, Chad whispered. The Four Seasons. That's where he is. Brenda, still confused, asked, "What? What is he doing with $5,000? He doesn't have that amount of money," and Chad would start to laugh. It was a deep, dry, unpleasant sound from the back of his throat. "Don't you get it?" he'd say, his voice shaking with a new kind of rage. "He's not just spending it, you idiot. He's flaunting it. He's mocking us." He held the phone up to her face. "That old broke, pathetic mailman," he hissed. "He has money. He has all the money and he's sitting in a $5,000 a night hotel laughing at us." Brenda looked at the receipt. Then she looked at her husband's face. They didn't think about apologizing. They didn't think about begging. Their desperation and humiliation had just found a target. Their terror had just turned into pure, undiluted rage. They were coming and I was waiting. I knew they were cornered. I knew they were desperate. What I didn't know was what kind of animals they were. Were they the kind that when trapped would whimper and beg for forgiveness, or were they the kind that would sharpen their claws and try to tear their way out? I got my answer 10 minutes later. I can hear Chad's voice in that motel room. Even now, I can hear the sound of the phone hitting the wall. That $5,000 receipt wasn't a clue. It was a declaration of war. "He's there," he would have roared, his voice cracking. "That lying, miserable old bastard. He's at the Four Seasons. He's spending our money." Our money? But Brenda would have whispered, still not understanding. "Yes, ours." Chad would be screaming, pacing that tiny room like a lunatic. "That house, that trust, that $15,000 roof. He has millions. He's been sitting on millions dressed in his stupid old man clothes, pretending to be a mailman while he's been laughing at us. He's been laughing at me." This was the moment, the turning point. A person with a conscience, a person with a soul would have felt shame. They would have felt remorse. They would have realized the depth of their own greed. But not Chad, not Brenda. They didn't feel shame. They felt cheated. They felt entitled. I can see my daughter's face. The tears of self-pity drying, being replaced by something else. Something hard and ugly. The humiliation from last night. Her in-laws laughing, her father bleeding on the carpet. That wasn't shame to her. That was an insult. And now the money she'd been told was hers. The money she was owed was being spent by that same man at a gift shop. "He owes us," she would have said, her voice low and trembling with a new kind of energy. A hateful energy. "He owes me." "Brenda, what are you talking about?" Chad would have asked, his own rage, pausing, intrigued by hers. "He embarrassed me," she would say, standing up, her fists clenched. "He let those people in my family treat him like trash. He let me be humiliated. He let me beg. He let me push him. He planned this. He wanted us to show our true colors. He made me look like a fool." "He did." Chad agreed, seeing his opening. "He made us both look like fools. He's not going to get away with it." Brenda would hiss. "He's not just going to cut us off and laugh. That money is mine. I am his only child. That house is mine. He owes me for last night. He owes me for all of it." They weren't going to apologize. They weren't coming to beg. They were coming to collect. I can see them in that dirty motel room, their faces flushed with rage and righteousness. They were no longer victims of a bad economy. They were heroes on a mission of justice. "We're going there," Chad would say, grabbing his coat. "What about the money for the cab?" Brenda would ask, the practical fear still there. "We use the last of it," he'd say. "This is it. We go there. We confront him. We tell him we know about his lies. We tell him we're not leaving until he gives us what's ours. We'll make a scene. We'll tell everyone what he did. He can't hide from us." They grabbed the last few crumpled bills they had. They left the room, slamming the door. They didn't have their BMW anymore, so they stood on the side of the highway. Two enraged, desperate people hailing a taxi. They were on their way to the Four Seasons. They thought they were the hunters. They thought they were finally going to corner the poor old mailman. They had no idea they were walking willingly into the center of the trap I had set just for them. And I was waiting. The elevator doors to the presidential suite dinged. It wasn't a loud sound, but in the quiet of that room, it was an explosion. Anita, who was reviewing a document, looked up at me. I just nodded. I had told hotel security to expect them. I had told them to let them up. A trapped animal is most dangerous when it thinks there is no way out. I was giving them a door, but it was a door to my cage, not to their freedom. The door slid open, and they practically fell into the room. Brenda and Chad, they didn't knock. They didn't pause. They stormed in, propelled by that cheap motel room rage. Their faces were red. Their clothes wrinkled from a night of panic. They looked like what they were, desperate, furious, and completely out of their depth. Brenda's eyes were wild. "Dad," she screamed, pointing a finger at me. You can't, Ice. Chad was right behind her, his chest puffed up, ready for a fight. You lying old man, he snarled. You're going to pay for. And then they stopped. Both of them, dead in their tracks, just inside the marble foyer of the suite. They weren't ready for this. They were waiting for the poor old mailman. They had been waiting for the little, fearful old man in the wrinkled blazer who they had pushed down the steps. They were ready to yell at him, abuse him, and trap him in a cheap motel room. They didn't think I would come. I wasn't standing. I was sitting quietly in a leather armchair with a high back. I didn't have on my old pants. I had on a $3,000 outfit that was made just for me. Wool in a dark charcoal color. The kind of suit that talks softly, not loudly. The dressing on my wound was really tidy. I didn't have my old wire-rimmed glasses, I had a new pair. I hadn't said anything. I merely looked at them. And I wasn't the only one. Anita Jackson sat to my right in her smart business suit, with her hands neatly folded on top of a stack of black leather-bound legal files. To my left were two additional men, Brenda and Chad's company lawyers, who they had never met before. They all had the same look of quiet, affluent disinterest on their faces. There were also two extremely big, very calm men in dark suits standing in the far corners of the room, nearly in the shadows. My security team. This wasn't a room in a hotel. This was a meeting room, and they had just barged in without being asked. Brenda's finger moved about. Chad's throat was too dry to say the word pay. Their faces lost all color. The cheap hot wrath turned into a cold, muddled fear right away. They gazed at the lawyer's big suite, the quiet guards, and then back at me. I hadn't moved. Brenda's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Dad, she eventually muttered. Her voice was no longer a scream, it was the little, scared voice of a child who had just stepped into the wrong room and seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Brenda, I responded. My voice was just as faint, but it filled the room. Chad, thank you for coming. Shut the door, please. We have a lot to discuss. Brenda's accusation echoed in the magnificent room. You lied to me. She was pointing at me, her finger shaking. All the fear was gone, replaced by the hot, blind rage of the entitled. All these years, you let me think you were poor. You let me. You deceived me. I just sat there. I let her scream. I let her empty herself of all that righteous fury. I looked at her. Lied, I finally said. That's the word you choose, Brenda. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence in that suite was absolute. I didn't lie, Brenda. You just never asked. You assumed. What does it matter? She shrieked. This is a game you're playing. Some kind of sick, twisted game. No, a new voice said. Anita Jackson stood up. She was magnificent. She was a tall, sharp woman, and she commanded the room in a way my daughter, with all her screaming, never could. This is not a game, Miss Price Thompson. This is an audit. Brenda and Chad both stared at her, confused. You accuse your father of lying, Anita said, her voice cutting through the air. Let's talk about lies. Let's talk about the executive bonus account that Mr. Thompson, your husband, said he had. Chad got uncomfortable. I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. He growled, I don't know who you are. But our money is private, Anita remarked, without even looking at him. Not when my client pays for it. Brenda was all she could think of. Your father didn't lie to you, Brenda. You just liked his lie better. You were too busy spending to ask a single question. Anita picked up the first thickest file from the stack. You seem to believe your father is a poor retired mailman. Let's look at the lifestyle of this poor man's daughter. She opened the file. $8,000 every single month for 24 months paid directly to the management company of your penthouse. Brenda stammered. That was Chad's, that was his bonus. He told me no, Anita said, her voice flat and cold. It was your father's generosity. He was paying your rent. I saw the color drain from Brenda's cheeks. What about the BMW 7 Series? Anita kept going. $2,000 a month. Your dad, the $25,000 tuition for Noah's private preschool, your dad, your American Express supplemental card, your Saks Fifth Avenue account, and your food delivery service are also included. Anita stopped for a while, letting the words hang in the air. Brenda, you've been living in a complete illusion for 2 years. A fantasy that the man you shoved down the stairs last night paid for completely. I looked at my daughter. She was staring at Chad now, her eyes wide with a new sense of terror. With a quiet thud, Anita closed the file. She claimed he had paid a total of $192,000 to keep up your way of life. He didn't tell you a falsehood. He paid for you. There was no noise in the room. Brenda looked like she was having trouble breathing. Chad was the first to speak up. He was like a rat trapped in a corner and saw only one way out, to attack. What does that mean? He laughed, and his face turned red. He is her dad. It's a present. A dad is meant to look after his family. He had to do that for her. He owes her. The pride. Even now, Anita's smile was scary and narrow. A present. She said it again. Mr. Thompson, my client is a logistics expert. He is really careful. He never does business that isn't safe. I was waiting for this point. Anita says you told your wife that these cash were bonuses for executives that were put into a joint account. You had her agree to the transfer each month in a digital way. Chad said, it's a family matter. Anita said, it's a legal matter. You and your wife agreed to the terms of the attached agreement every time you hit accept on that transfer. A paper that you obviously never read. My wife and Marie made me do it. Nate, parasites never read the fine print. She said, as she always did, that she was correct. Anita slipped one piece of paper across the desk. This is a copy of the electronic promissory note that you both signed 24 times, she stated. Brenda moved forward and grabbed the paper. While she read, her lips moved without making a sound. I, Brenda Price Thompson, agree to take this amount as a personal loan that I can pay back whenever I want. She let go of the paper like it had burned her. Anita's voice echoed in the apartment as she said, $192,000. And a rough interest. And Ms. Price Thompson. Mr. Thompson. At 3:05 a.m. my client has publicly and legally asked for full reimbursement this morning. If Brenda was pale before, she was a ghost. Now she had to face the truth. She wasn't just cut off. She wasn't just poor. Anita said, you owe $192,000. We demand payment by the end of the business day tomorrow, or we will start the process of taking all of your assets. Chad just laughed. It was a hysterical sound that was quite high-pitched. What to take? We don't have anything. You basically took everything. You can't extract blood from a rock, you old fool. He pointed at me with a face full of fury, but Brenda. She stood up straight. The panic was gone, and in its place was a frantic, familiar math problem. She answered, her voice wavering yet steady, the house. Chad looked at her like he didn't understand. What? The house? She yelled and pointed at me. Your small post office. It's mine. I am the only child you have. You can't take that away from me. We will sell the house and give you the money you owe us. There it was, the last harsh reality. To her, my house was just a bank account. I eventually said something. My voice was low, and it pierced through her screaming. No, Brenda. Yes, she screamed. The lawyer on the phone said that. It's in a trust that Mom set up. It's property of the family. I'm the one who gets the money. I said you were. I saw her face become blank. I stood up and walked gently toward Brenda, saying, that house. And every other cent your mom left was safe. A woman who saw this day coming 10 years ago protected it. I turned to Anita. She raised the next file. The Anne Marie Price Trust was a work of art. I told my daughter, my voice full of regret at this last act. It had regulations and conditions. Your mom was a really smart woman. She knew you were weak. She knew you liked guys like him. I pointed at Chad. So, she added Clause 4, Section B. It said that you would be the only one to benefit unless you married a man I, as the trustee, explicitly disapproved of in writing, giving convincing proof of financial or moral instability. But you didn't, Brenda yelled. You grinned when you came to the wedding. I answered, I know. I was a fool. I believed I could keep you safe. I assumed that giving him money would help him get better. I didn't use that part. I was weak. But your mother was strong. I stopped. This was the final blow since Brenda added a second regulation. Section C of Clause 4, the Judas Clause. She made it clear that if you ever did something that hurt me on purpose or put me in danger, you would be immediately and permanently disinherited. I only glanced at her. I didn't have to say anything else. She was aware. She remembered. Brenda, the instant you touched me last night, I said, my voice breaking with the finality of it. You gave it all away the moment you shoved me. She shook her head and said, no, no, no. It was Chad who laughed. A sound that is broken and unpleasant. A snare. He wheezed. A silly little trap. What does that mean? You took her out of your will? Who gets it? You can't just keep it. He still thought this was for him. He still assumed they were negotiating. You are right, Chad. I don't understand. I told Marie that she was very careful. She always valued character, not just family. Brenda looked up with wide eyes, confused. What kind of character? Who are you talking about? Do you remember Kesha, your cousin? I asked. The name hit her like a slap. I saw the flicker of recognition, followed by absolute disdain. Kesha? She spat. Kesha is my cousin, the person who teaches in the Bronx. The person who buys clothes from the second-hand store. The one you don't want to come to your wedding. I agreed. You said, and I quote, that the one you informed me about was poor trash and would make you look bad in front of Chad's parents. The one who just obtained her master's degree in special education while you were at Saks wasting my money. How about her? Brenda hissed. I just said, she gets it, Brenda. There was complete stillness in the room. Marie chose Kesha as the only contingent beneficiary. As of last night, about 10:30 p.m., when you hit me, the whole $5 million Anne-Marie Price Trust was legally transferred to her. Brenda made a noise that sounded like an animal in pain. It wasn't just about the money. It was the shame. She knew that all she had planned and everything she had lied to me about was now in the hands of the one person she thought was underneath her. She came at me quickly. I'll kill you, she screamed. She didn't get within 5 feet. The 2 security men, who had been quiet until then, stepped forward. One of them grabbed her by the arms. She thrashed, but it didn't help. Chad, on the other hand, didn't move to help his wife. He was looking at me. His rage was gone. He was calculating. He was a rat, and the ship was sinking. He was looking for a lifeboat. This is crazy, he said, trying to sound reasonable. You can't do this. This is family. I'll get lawyers. I'm going to combat this. I'll tell the world what you did. He was still threatening me. I didn't even look at him. I just nodded to Mr. Harrison, our lead attorney, who was sitting next to me. Harrison stood up. He was a tall, imposing man. Mr. Thompson, he said in a voice like polished gravel. I would strongly advise against any threats. You don't scare me, Chad blustered. I'm not trying to, Harrison said. I am simply advising. He slid the last black folder across the table. You seem to think you are a victim here. The district attorney's office, however, has a different opinion. Chad's face went from red to a sickly mottled white. We know about the $400,000 embezzlement charge, Mr. Thompson. We know the DA has been building a case against you. We also know that my client, Mr. Price, was the only thing standing between you and a federal indictment. I watched Chad's facade crumble. However, Harrison continued, Mr. Price is a kind person. He doesn't think his daughter should be bound to a ship that is going down. He has arranged a proposition. This was the final move. Harrison pulled out 2 documents. This one, he said, tapping the first, is a legal agreement stating that Mr. Price will not provide the DA with any additional incriminating evidence he has discovered about your creative finances. And this one, he tapped. The second is a petition for divorce from your wife Brenda, citing irreconcilable differences. Sign both right now and you walk out that door. You will still face the DA, but you will face them alone without Mr. Price's considerable resources aimed against you. I watched him. This was the man my daughter had chosen, the man she had pushed me for. He looked at Brenda, who was still being held by security, sobbing and whispering, Kesha, no, Kesha. He looked at the divorce papers. He looked at the lawyers. He didn't hesitate for a single second. Give me the pen, he said. He didn't say goodbye to Brenda. He didn't even look at her again. He just signed his name, severing their marriage in 3 quick, angry strokes. Good doing business, he muttered, throwing the pen on the table. Get him out of my sight, I said. The security guard released my daughter who slid to the floor. And the other guard escorted my ex and in-law out of the suite, a free man for now, but one who had just signed away his last and only ally. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the room with Anita, the lawyers, and my daughter, who was weeping on the floor, utterly and finally alone. This was the moment, the final test. This was the man my daughter Brenda had chosen, the man she had pushed me for, the man she had allied herself with against her own blood. Chad stood there, his chest heaving, his face slick with sweat. He looked at the divorce papers on the polished mahogany table. He looked at the 2 impassive lawyers. He looked at the security men. Then he looked at his wife, my daughter. She was still being held by the other security guard. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was just hanging. Her head was bowed. Her expensive hair was a mess. And she was whispering one word over and over again like a prayer. Kesha, no. Kesha, no. She was a ghost. All the arrogance, the fire, the entitlement, it was gone. She was just a broken woman in a wrinkled dress. And I saw Chad's eyes. I saw the calculation. It was fast. It was cold. It was reptilian. He looked at this weeping broken woman. He looked at this stranger his wife had become. And he saw nothing. He saw no value, no asset. He saw a liability, a broke, hysterical, useless liability, now $192,000 in debt. He had been willing to plot murder for $1 million inheritance. He was not willing to stay for a $200,000 debt. He didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. He didn't say her name. He didn't offer a single word of comfort. He didn't even look at her again. His movement was a lunge. He snatched the pen from the table. Brenda stopped whispering. She looked up, her tear-filled eyes wide with a new final dawning horror. She finally saw him for what he was. "Chad," she whispered. He didn't look at her. His eyes were on the paper. The only sound in that vast silent suite was the vicious scratch, scratch, scratch of the pen as he signed his name. He severed their marriage in 3 quick angry strokes. He threw the pen down on the table. It rolled and came to a stop next to the black folder. He smoothed his suit jacket. He actually straightened his tie. "Good doing business," he muttered, "not to me, but to the lawyers." Mr. Harrison, the attorney, just nodded. "The DA will be in touch." The security guard, who wasn't holding Brenda, stepped forward and put a hand on Chad's shoulder. Chad just shrugged him off, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out of the suite, escorted. He walked out like a man who had just closed a deal, not like a man who had just abandoned his wife to face federal charges. The heavy door clicked shut. Silence. It was a terrible, absolute silence. Brenda was still standing, held up by the guard. She was no longer crying. She was just watching the door he had walked through. The guard looked at me. I nodded. He released his grip on her arms. She didn't fall right away. She just stood there for a moment, suspended in the empty space where her entire life had just been. Then she collapsed. She didn't faint. She just folded. She crumpled onto the expensive carpet, not like a person, but like a pile of rags. The poor rags she had always despised. She curled into a ball, put her face in her hands, and the sound that came out of her was not a scream. It was not a sob. It was a deep guttural animal wail of pure abject loss. It was the only sound in the room. I am not at the Four Seasons. That was a command center. A place of business. A war room. I am home. This is my real home. The one Brenda has never been invited to. The one she never even knew existed. It is a penthouse. Yes, but it is not Chad's cold, sterile glass and marble box. My walls are lined with mahogany bookshelves floor to ceiling. The floors are dark, worn hardwood, softened by thick Persian rugs that I bought in my travels. The air smells of old leather pipe tobacco and fresh dark roast coffee. This apartment is not an advertisement. It is a life. It is filled with the art I have collected for over 40 years. Jacob Lawrence prints hang on the walls. Roar beard and collages. There is soul here. My soul. Anne-Marie's soul. My desk is cluttered not with designer magazines but with books on logistics, global economics, and a well-worn copy of The Wealth of Nations. A photograph of Anne-Marie smiling sits next to my monitor. It is the only picture I need. I never told Brenda about this place. Why would I? When she was a teenager, she was already obsessed with brand names and shiny surfaces. She saw my little bungalow, the one I kept as my official address, as a source of shame. I let her believe I was the simple mailman, the simple retired old man. It was easier. It kept the leeches away. Or so I thought. I stand in my kitchen pouring the steaming water into the French press. The smell of the coffee is rich, familiar. It calms me. The last 3 days have been a blur of lawyers, bank transfers, and security briefings. The fallout from the hotel was fast, and it was brutal. But this morning, the apartment is quiet. The storm is over. The silence is comfortable, broken only by the drip of the coffee. Then the doorbell rings. It is not the harsh, impatient buzz of the motel or the sterile chime of the hotel. It is a soft, warm bell. I am not expecting anyone. Anita is handling the legal filings. The security team has been dismissed. Brenda is somewhere else dealing with the consequences. I walk to the door, my bare feet silent on the thick rug. I look through the peephole, and my heart, which I thought had turned to ice, does a strange, unfamiliar flip. It's Kesha. I open the door. She's standing there looking completely lost. My sister's daughter, 30 years old, wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She's clutching her purse like it's a life raft. She looks like she's on the verge of tears. "Uncle Nate," she says, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I didn't even know you lived here. Your old number, it was disconnected." And I step aside and hold the door open. "Come in, Kesha. You are not bothering me. I've been meaning to call you." She steps inside and her eyes go wide. She's taking in the bookshelves, the high ceilings, the art, the quiet wealth. She is just as stunned as Brenda was, but I can see her expression is different. Brenda saw power in money. Kesha is seeing a life. I don't understand. She stammers, turning to me, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. I got a call this morning from a lawyer, a woman named Anita Jackson, my estate planner, I say quietly. Yes. She said she was your estate planner. She asked me to come to this address. She said you had something important to discuss with me. Uncle Nate, what is going on? Is Brenda okay? I heard I saw some things online about her and Chad. She's a good kid, a good woman. The first thing she asks about is her cousin. The same cousin who called her poor trash character. And Marie was right. I smile. A real smile, not the cold, sharp smile I gave Chad. Kesha, come sit down, please. Can I get you some coffee? It's freshly pressed. She sits on the edge of the large leather sofa, looking like a small bird in a very large nest. I hand her a warm mug. Uncle Nate, she starts. I don't want to be involved with anything. I say, sitting in the recliner opposite from her, this isn't about Brenda. This is about you and your Aunt Anne Marie. I observe her while I think about what she said. I remark to Kesha, I remember your college graduation 7 years ago. I was so proud of you. I remember standing by the punch bowl and asking you what your big plan was. She blinks, not sure what to make of the memory. I remember you telling me that you didn't want to be a CEO. You didn't want to be wealthy. You indicated your desire was to teach, have a little house with a small yard, and maybe adopt an old dog from the shelter. You mentioned you only needed enough stability to start your own family. Tears fill her eyes. I still want that, Uncle Nate. But I work as a teacher in the Bronx. I live in a studio apartment that I rent. I won't be able to pay off my master's degree until I'm 50. A home? A yard? That's not going to happen for me. For folks like that, it's simply a dream. I lean forward. Your Aunt Anne left very clear directions in her will. She made a trust, and the trust had a house in it. A house? She speaks softly. I mention my old house. The small house in the historic neighborhood. The one where Brenda grew up. It's empty currently. It is just sitting there. It's paid off. It has a new roof that cost $15,000. Kesha just stares at me with the mug shaking in her hands. I can't accept that, Uncle Nate. That residence belongs to Brenda. No, I respond, my voice calm but forceful. No, it's not. It's yours. Marie made sure of that if certain things happened. I don't tell her anything else. I don't tell her about the push, the $5 million, or the disinheritance. The lawyers will take care of that. This is for the family. Kesha, she always loved you. She always claimed you had a strong spine. She stated you were the only one who knew what was real. Kesha is now crying in front of everyone. Tears were falling down her face without making a sound. But a home? I smile. I have a tiny house that I'm not using, and you need a place to live so you may start a family. It looks like a straightforward, reasonable answer. I let the question hang in the air. Do you want it? Kesha just stared at me, and it was evident that her mind was having trouble processing what I had said. But Uncle Nate, she said. Why? What would make Aunt Anne Marie do this? Why would she do it to Brenda? It seems so mean. I sat back in my chair, and the ancient leather creaked. I had to get her to comprehend. I had to respect what my wife really wanted. I told Kesha it wasn't mean. It was the hardest type of love. Your Aunt Anne Marie noticed Brenda's heart. She knew Brenda was weak, that she needed others to like her, and that she would hook up with any man who offered her a good life. I saw the picture of my wife on the desk. Marie didn't put up that trust to get back at Brenda. She made it to keep her safe. To keep her safe from guys like Chad. She realized that if Brenda could easily get to this money, every parasite and gambler within 100 miles would want to obtain it. They would eat her alive. I gazed back at Kesha with steady eyes. Your aunt didn't only want to give Brenda money. She wanted to give her an opportunity to grow as a person. And sometimes, Kesha, true love doesn't mean offering someone a safety net. You have to be brave enough to let them fall. It's about letting kids hit rock bottom so they can learn how to get back up on their own. As I spoke, a disturbance on the desk scared us both. It was ringing on my phone. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a number. I knew who the anonymous caller was. I told Kesha to wait and answered, putting it on speaker. Nate Price, is this? There was a sound on the other end. A noise that sounded like a stifled sob. The sound of someone straining to talk with a sore throat. Dad. My blood turned chilly. Brenda was the one. I hadn't heard her voice since she was crying on the floor of the hotel suite. This voice was not the same. It was horse-uro. There was nothing there. All the anger, all the entitlement, all the fire, it was all gone. Please, Dad, she was sobbing. That horrible, ragged sound of someone who has run out of tears. I don't have a place to go. My cards don't function. They kicked me out of the motel. My pals won't pick up the phone. She drew a breath that made her gasp. Dad, I'm at a shelter. A place for homeless people to stay on the east side. It's very cold. I'm afraid. Kesha looked at me with a face full of sorrow and put her hand over her mouth. I could tell that she was sad for her cousin. Brenda's voice came back, small and scared. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. She finally gave up. Sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. Please, Dad. I'm so sorry. I heard. I let the quiet go on. I let her apology, the first sincere one I'd heard from her in 20 years, hang in the air of my warm, quiet apartment. I thought about Anne-Marie. I pondered about what she said. Let her learn how to stand. This was the time. This was the exam. Not for her, but for me. Would I still be the weak parent I had always been? Would I hurry down there, take out my checkbook, and fix everything? Would I place her back in a penthouse, wrap her in a safety net, and show her that her acts didn't matter? Or would I finally be the guy Anne-Marie knew I should be? I took a big breath. Kesha was looking at me with wide eyes, waiting to see what I would do. I answered, I know, Brenda. There was no anger in my voice. It wasn't cold. It was just quiet. I know you don't have anything. I can tell you're afraid. She cried out in a faint, frantic way. Dad, you'll come fetch me. You will help me. I shut my eyes. I added again, I know, Brenda, my voice calm but very firm. I know. I stopped. I said this, throwing all of my wife's power and all of my new determination into the last question. What are you going to do? As you asked, here is the lesson from this story and a call to action. This story teaches a strong lesson on what happens when you do something. It shows us that your character isn't based on how much money you show off, but on how honest you are when no one is watching. Brenda and Chad thought their father's benevolence was a vulnerability they could use to their advantage, so they established a life based on entitlement and lying. But letting someone act badly isn't love. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to step back and let someone deal with the results of their own choices instead of giving them a safety net. That's the only way they'll ever learn how to make anything real for themselves. What would you have done if you were Nate? Was he too severe, or was this brutal love the only way for Brenda to learn? Please share your opinions in the comments.